Australia's government has just announced that they are going to continue investing in home batteries, solar, renewable energy, and wind energy. But on the same day, the fossil fuel lobby says voters don't want any of that. They want nuclear power. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. We've just seen in the news within the past 24 hours, there's been an increase in many countries worldwide of up to 60% in the amount of people who are buying and installing home batteries. Solar has surged over the past 12 months all around the world. Solar farms, battery storage has gone crazy. And the biggest reason is simply the costs have come down so much that people think to themselves, you'd have to be stupid not to do it. Why am I paying all this money for electricity when I don't have to? So they're changing. Big changes are being made, especially by Australians. In Queensland, 1 million people, it's a state of not that many people, but 1 million people, a very large percentage of the population installed solar panels on their homes in 2023 alone. However, the media is saying this. A poll has revealed the energy minister gets poor marks for getting rid of nuclear power as other countries vote to get a move on with the technology to cut electricity bills and emissions, said the Daily Telegraph. RenewEconomy.com.au says that 2BG's Ray Hadley elaborated on this poll conducted by the Minerals Council, found 67% of people polled in Bowen's electorate are in favour of overturning Australia's ban on nuclear power. In other words, 67% of voters want nuclear. They want it all over Australia, apparently, they're saying. According to 2GB's Ben Fordham, that equates to 67% of voters being in favour of using nuclear power as the way to provide electricity and reduce emissions in Australia. Fordham says the survey shows a majority of Labor voters polled support lifting the ban on nuclear power. Chris Bowen is losing support at a record pace. The energy minister is having some problems when it comes to convincing people that he's on the right path. When it comes to energy, his all or nothing push towards renewables has lost voters in his own electorate. They're basically saying that the person in charge in Australia of what we use, our future energy plans, will lose his position of power because he hasn't gone forward with plans to build massive, incredibly expensive nuclear power plants in a country that has millions and millions of acres, millions of hectares of land, desert, just land we don't use because we don't need it. We have a very small population, one of the biggest countries in the world, and we have this space and size, and we have a hell of a lot of sun, more sun than almost any other country on the planet. But instead of using solar to soak up all that sun, we should build massive nuclear power plants. Bowen has backed himself into a corner by labelling nuclear power as a fantasy wrapped in a delusion, said the opposition to Australia's government. They say, so what's more risk, installing nuclear reactors or building experimental projects that are still in their infancy around the world? Now, apparently, batteries and solar farms are purely experimental, which obviously we all know is completely false. Complete and utter nonsense. In fact, one of the most successful energy projects in Australian history is the Mega Tesla battery pack, which was the biggest battery in the world for a while, which was deployed in Adelaide. It solved all of their energy problems, or nearly all of them anyway. Minerals Council is a fossil fuel lobby group that has pivoted to cheering for nuclear power now that coal is dying. They say anything but renewables. They hate renewable energy. Unfortunately, there are a hell of a lot of organizations like this that still exist in many countries around the world. Now, unfortunately, because of our government here misleading people about nuclear power and its real world costs and its time to build, the pro-nuclear power machine, according to reneweconomy.com.au, is well and truly off and running in Australia, embraced by the coalition as a key policy campaign plank and spurred on by a hysterical mainstream media who are just desperate for people to read their publications. Now, the interesting thing is here, I'm curious to know, I have voted for the Liberal Party in the past. So That's essentially the Republican Party in Australia. But if they're so keen on bringing back nuclear power, why didn't they do it when they were in power? The Liberal Party has been in power in Australia many, many times during the period that this nuclear ban has been in place, but they've never made any efforts to overturn the ban. The pro-nuclear campaign is based on incorrect claims, said the Australian government. That opposition to nuclear energy is based on irrational fears that nuclear energy is necessary for climate mitigation, that new nuclear energy technologies will be cheaper and safer than existing ones, which they could be, but doesn't seem likely in my opinion, and that there are allegedly no scenarios for the transition to 100% renewable energy unless we build nuclear power plants. To the contrary, critiques of nuclear power have been published by physical and social scientists and engineers. They say that in the real world, nuclear energy is too expensive, too dangerous both in terms of accidents and the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and too slow to plan and build. Now, I don't agree with the dangerous part. Yeah, I mean, there's been issues in the past, but I don't think realistically it's that any more dangerous than getting in your car and driving to the street for, I don't know, down the street to buy some milk. But I do agree that in the real world, nuclear power plants always cost, on average, double. That's the average. That's the global average. They cost double what they are estimated to cost, and they take approximately 2 to 3 times longer to build than what they're estimated to take in terms of build time. Now, the reality is, guys, that nuclear's share of world electricity production has been declining from its peak, says Renew Economy, of 17.6% in 1996 to only 9.2% in 2022. That figure is likely to have fallen to around 8% in 2023 as countries like Germany just turned off all their nuclear power plants simply because, well, renewables are cheaper and better. Now, unfortunately, the truth here, guys, is I've reported on small modular nuclear reactors on many occasions, but the reality is they're not reliably used anywhere yet, and they're not easily installed. This is more of a theoretical product. And yeah, they may work. It could work very well, but we don't know for sure. It is still very much in its experimental infancy stages, this concept of small nuclear modular reactors. I do think they'll have their place eventually, but that place probably not in a country like Australia where we have millions of acres of land and incredible amounts of sunshine. Now, there's only 2 small modular nuclear reactors actually in operation worldwide right now. Neither of them meet the modular definition of serial factory production of reactor components. In other words, they're one-off prototype type builds, which were actually very expensive. One of them's in Russia, one of them's in China, and both of them had massive cost blowouts and multi-year delays, which is unfortunately the norm for nuclear power plants. Now, yes, there's been a lot of hype recently about nuclear technology. There's been a lot of hype about batteries, solar, and wind, but the reality is here. Renewables work. We know they work. They work really well. They work really well in Australia. Now, the most frustrating myth being pushed by the pro-nuclear power lobby, says Renew Economy, is that it is a smarter economic and climate move for Australia than 100% renewables. That it's not possible to decarbonise without nuclear power, which of course is completely false. In Australia, ClimateWorks has published 2 decarbonisation scenarios spanning all economic sectors in which electricity emissions decline to 0 in 2034 and 2038 respectively. In the former scenario, the 2034 scenario, net zero CO2 emissions from the whole economy are reached about 2039. More detailed scenarios of 100% renewable electricity in Australia have been published by many different organisations, proving it is most certainly possible. We already know it is. It's already happening in Adelaide, one of the largest cities in Australia. Now, as Renew Economy have said numerous times, there are many times when cities in Australia have hit 100% renewable generation, and it works. It's affordable and it's most certainly achievable. We're already headed in that direction. Now, according to David Osman, who is an expert in renewables, he said he runs a simulation of Australia's main electricity grid using rescaled generation data to show that it can get very close to 100% renewable electricity with just 5 hours of battery storage. That's all we need to completely decarbonize Australia. That, in my opinion, is something we should be celebrating. If the other side of politics here in Australia got on board and supported renewables, if they supported solar, wind, and batteries, all of this would happen faster. All of these objections by these pro-fossil fuel organizations, by the other side of government, they're just simply slowing down our transition to having cleaner air, to having a better country. It's unfortunate to see. What are your thoughts? Do you agree here? Do you think we need nuclear power here in Australia? Do you think we need nuclear power in your country? What's better? What's your opinion? Thanks for watching.